marketers. Deborah Eckerling here.
And I'm Keith Smith, and we host the MPN Meta Marketing Show, which is not just another marketing podcast, but the marketing podcast about all the other marketing podcasts.
Podcasts are booming, right? We love them, and people actually listen. They don't scroll, they don't swipe, well, except maybe during the ad breaks.
But here's the secret. With the Marketing Podcast Network, your ads don't make people hit skip. We put your brand on shows that people actually want to hear.
That's right. We match your message with podcasts that make marketing nerds like us perk up and take notes, or at least nod knowingly, pretending they understand.
And don't worry, because we'll deliver your ad naturally. People might even think that we love your brand personally, which of course we totally do, unless it's a veggie smoothie, then maybe not.
If you want your brand heard without making listeners roll their eyes,
head to marketingpodcasts.net and catch marketing fans at work, rest and play. Seriously, your audience is already listening. Make sure they hear your brand and not our awkward jokes.
Join the conversation, because good ads shouldn't just be tolerated, they should be enjoyed.
Yes!
Every holiday shopper's got a list, but Ross shoppers, you've got a mission. Like a gift run that turns into a disco snow globe, throw pillows, and PJs for the whole family, dog included. At Ross, holiday magic isn't about spending more, it's about giving more for less. Ross, work your magic.
I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. What does the producer of Wedding Crashers, Serendipity, and Van Wilder know about building brands? Turns out, a lot. This week on Brand, Andrew Panay shares how Hollywood storytelling principles shape not just movies, but also unforgettable brand stories for companies like T-Mobile, Microsoft, and Anheuser-Busch. My interview with Andrew is coming right up. But first, Andrew Panay, welcome to On Brand.
Thank you, Nick. I'm happy to be here. I'm very excited to get into it with you today.
Yeah, I am excited because I feel like these are worlds that people feel like, oh, they should, Hollywood storytelling and brand building. We need that kind of originality, but a lot of people have trouble connecting the dots. What are most getting wrong about bringing those two concepts, those two worlds together?
Well, what I find fascinating when I first got into this was I think there is, in the brand space, maybe when they've started to work with, the Hollywood players in behind the camera, let's say that, okay? I think maybe the disconnect is that the filmmakers are going off and kind of doing their own thing and coming back and handing the brand whatever it is the filmmaker's vision was, and then which then doesn't lead to any return on investment, which doesn't even connect that much to the brand, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's the narrative fear that the brands could potentially feel. I may not blame them. I don't have examples of it per se, but I think that's the narrative or the spirit that might be the fear of what the brand is thinking might happen. And then the flip side is the filmmakers might be feeling confined to having to back into a brand or a potential brief kind of thing, right? So because in Hollywood, we're not being briefed. We're coming in with a blank sheet of paper. So I think there may be a disconnect that's happening. And the truth is, we are very distant in terms of the way we come into things and the philosophies of the approach. However, we are actually very, very similar and very close in our storytelling abilities. And that from the filmmaking side, what I didn't realize until I was trained when my first client was Microsoft, who had the patience to help us process the way we think about story and backing into 60 seconds, right? So you had a company like Microsoft believing in the talent that we were, and that we had the ability to actually think in 60 seconds because we make 2-hour movies. So the disconnect is, how can these filmmakers even think in 60 seconds? They make movies in 2 hours. And then the filmmaking group is thinking, well, how can we think in 60 seconds? We think in 2 hours. So that's where there's the disconnect.
Right.
And at that point, what I then realized, Nick, was, wait a minute. We actually, as filmmakers, think in 60 seconds. We're actually fairly decent branders, if not pretty good wedding crashers. 2 guys crash weddings to meet girls until one of them falls in love and has to lie about it for the rest of the film. 60-second pitch. I think I did that in, I don't know, Nick, time it, 25 seconds, right? That's a 30-second TV spot. But you don't, as a filmmaker, I wish I went to marketing school first sometimes to realize that we need return on investment on our work. As filmmakers, you're like, I'm making this movie. I'm having so much fun. Better be good. You don't even think about the business side of it. Like, wait a minute. The studio would love to recoup on this. And then.
Yeah. It's interesting too. You talk about like the 2 hours, the 60 seconds. A few episodes back, I talked with Hartoon Weiss from TikTok, and she talked about, just even shorter than 30 seconds. What does media like that do to the brand stories that we tell?
Well, you got to adjust for that. I've learned, I think, Nick, if you were to ask me that 3 years ago, 5 years ago, I would have said, oh, Nick, it's a disaster in storytelling and master brand storytelling. But I actually, if you can lock them in 3 to 4 seconds in brand and excite them, that is plenty of time in culture now to lock them in and get them excited and interested. Nowadays, I'd like to do that in my 60 seconds, get them in that 3 to 5 seconds where they're like, whoa, I'm watching something interesting. But also the key is just don't forget your brand in those first 5 seconds either. People actually want to know what they're watching. They get very excited about being in the know. Waiting too long to try and hook people, they're just not interested. And so it really goes back down to the Greeks, Greek mythology. It's like there's 7 stories. We all know them inherently in our DNA. Give the people what they want. They want to be in on the joke. Why my comedies have worked, God bless. Maybe, for the most part, okay, there's been some misses, but for the most part is that the reason why people laugh is they're in on the joke. They know what's coming. And then you want to throw a little curveball and excite them with like, oh, I thought I knew what was coming, but I'm in on the joke. And then you took me on a journey. You can do that in 15 seconds and really excite people. Look, like any greedy filmmaker, right? Sure, I would love 90 seconds. Those kind of roller coaster journeys are amazing. And there are moments for those. Super Bowl, Nick, where you get an audience who's begging for more time to go on that ride with you. But given how much is being thrown at us, I think you can do a brand story, brand story in 10 seconds, no problem.
Well, it seems like that dynamic too that you're talking about, kind of the structure of something where you've got kind of a slow lead in and then some sort of turn versus that immediate hook. And it seems like audiences today who are in this state of constant partial attention need that hook right away to continue attending to your story so that it doesn't lose out to their phone or swiping or where else they might be drawn.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, the best part about creativity from the beginning of time is it loves to evolve. It keeps us sharp. The main thing for me, and one of the things that surprises me about the industry is until you meet your significant others, right, in the branding space. So in my case, my brands I work with, Microsoft and T-Mobile and all the brands that I've worked with now, the like-minded, like to surprise your audience. And from the beginning of time, right, Nick, like you could see evolution of of what people are looking for. However, there's also versions of going back in time, right? We love to do this in audiences love to go circle back to the 90s now, right? They love it. There's a safety in doing that, but that is an evolution. It's like, well, it's an evolved 90s vibe. It's not exactly 90s. It's got 90s flair, but we're always looking to go from skinny jeans to baggy jeans we go back, but there's always a new twist. We're always evolving as humans. And I really I just love it. I embrace it. Like I don't push back on technology. I won't push back on evolution. As a matter of fact, I get too bored, and I look at my film life, and I was always trying to push in. If I was doing Wedding Crashers and then went to Disney, I made a deal at Disney. Does that really make sense? I don't know. I'm at that point in my life. Yes, for me it did. No, it's time to go. Let's go into the family space and do some buddy comedies over here. And part of that is what I'm getting at with brands is, are you riding the wave that you've been on, or are you creating a new wave? And that is the key that I believe in challenging yourselves as a brand, us, my own internal team, and then the brands themselves into challenging evolution of creativity. And are you evolving not only the actual creative itself, but like the strategy of how you want to move forward? And are you a little bit scared? I think you have to feel some fear and not lock. I've had conversations with, CEOs and CMOs about, I've had quotes to me, well, we are number one, so we're good right now. I would argue, I would push against that. And I have. And I've said, that's exactly why I'm pushing you to move beyond that, to move way ahead of where you're at. Because if there's one thing about being number one that's scary, is there's nowhere else to go. So you will be getting nipped at. And there's a lot of fear in that, Nick. So
as we talk about creativity, originality, you mentioned your long relationship with T-Mobile. In Hollywood, borrowing too closely from someone's work can have serious consequences. And there was the recent AT&T spoof of T-Mobile's campaign. I wondered if you had what your thoughts were on that.
Well, Nick, that's I actually have, how about this? I have actually some questions as well.
Okay.
for my competitor, for our competitors, I would be I think spoofing is really fun. And I actually think it's a compliment. You could look at it as a compliment as well. I think if you take this, and emulation, you could also argue is the highest form of flattery. And I've also taken that. And I will say this to you, that I love people. We all get inspired by the different 7 stories that there's the hero's journey, right? 0 to hero. There's, boy loses girl, guy, gets girl, loses girl. There's 7 stories that we all recognize in our DNA, and we need to hit those 7 stories throughout and it's almost like we're born with those 7 stories, the Greek mythology. It's like, it goes back that far. However, I think being inspired by one another is really great. I think originality to move your brand forward is the key, in my opinion, to have other people chase, because you have to ask yourself, for your brand, do you want why? And why are you, if you are going to do a version that looks exactly the same and your competitor is doing that, why is the question I have, and what is the thought behind it? Spoof is one thing, but when the spoof elements come out, what is the strategy behind that? For me, I'm looking at that going, okay, that's that. Where am I going? I'm always focusing on where I am going, and how do we push originality for my clients, for T-Mobile. Most importantly, Nick, what I'll roll into is, whether you're emulating or you're borrowing or you're inspired by or whatnot, you got to ask yourself this question. I asked our team this. Nick, if you make a good spot, is that going to hit what the brand, is it what they need? What is the measure of success? Is it moving the brand forward? Is it ROI? You can make a really good spot. You can make a great spot. And at this point, Nick, if with the credits my team has and the movies that we've all created, if we can't make a good spot or a great spot, then we really should be out of, I really will fire myself. It's so ridiculous that we can't, deliver good work. But that's not the question that I'm always pushing on, and we're relentless is, does it matter if something is great, if it really doesn't move the needle for the brand, or the client is not excited, or even if the client is excited, but if it didn't get the objective? What is the objective? Is it to sell phones, for example, with T-Mobile? Is it to get people to sign up for satellite service, which we did last year for Super Bowl, Nick? Like, was that our flashiest spot we've ever made? No, it was 12 times higher than anybody else on the bowl. Well, we did the least flashiest work and had the highest return on investment ever, right? And even that, so going back to your question in competitors, I would ask, why? Number one. Two, is it original enough? Is it original enough for them to move their business? If they feel that way, then sure, I guess. It's certainly, I don't quite get that, but to each their own. I was surprised, to say the least.
On Brand will be right back after this. Now, back to the show. So I realize that I should have done a better job as a podcast host setting that up. So T-Mobile, your spot. Pitch it like you pitched Wedding Crashers. What happens for folks listening that may not, that have probably seen it, but
Okay. Well, it's Billy Bob Thornton in the middle of Fort Worth, Texas, in the middle of the fields. He's kind of, you sort of see him from the distance walking kind of over the horizon kind of energy, and shots of just middle of nowhere shots. And it's him talking about how the truth, he's speaking truths, which is, hey, Verizon was the best. We did this new study came out that said we are now we have the best network currently, according to this study. And we appreciate that they were there. We're now have taken over, and we feel really confident about that. And here are the reasons why. And we're walking through the fields, and there's tractors and, hay out there in the middle of nowhere. And on those are sort of talking points about our proof points as to why T-Mobile backing our claims, so to speak. And then Billy ends the spot with, you won't believe where I am actually, because I'm in the middle of nowhere essentially. And then the joke of like, by the way, where am I? So there is a cheeky playfulness to our brand that we're really proud of. We don't take ourselves that seriously. So that's the joke, is that we're dead serious, but we also know how to giggle at ourselves. We have a nice wink always in our work. And that's a really fine line, Nick, to find that tone. So that's the spot.
And then AT&T comes in with,
Luke Wilson walking over the horizon, shots of middle of nowhere, the same road essentially, and kind of, certain placement of their backing up their claims. So it's very similar in and cheeky and smart and well done, quite honestly. So it's, yes.
But your questions too, I think, are important ones that you were talking about previously before the break. Is sure on all of those counts, but strategically, like, what is the needle that AT&T is looking to move there outside of being a part of that conversation that is not really even theirs. So
Nick, that's the question I'm asking. And by the way, again, you can hear my tone. I don't really want to focus on it that much because I'm not in there. I'm not in the board meetings. I'm not in the rooms. I don't know what the strategy is. I'd love to, just for my own, maybe it's to mix up the conversation. Maybe it's to deep. I don't know. I know that for me, I think it is strategy. Spoofing is a strategy. And if that is the strategy, we've spoofed. There is a lot of fun to be had in that, as long as you're spoofing. And so I love to ask the question myself, being behind those closed doors. And I think that is going back to that. I think the question I ask my own team always is, why? For anything that we do, what is the point? And do we have a strategy behind what we're trying to accomplish? And I'm sure they have one, and maybe it's even working. So I can't get into that. I'm not, as you and I, Nick, we're not in those rooms. I find it fascinating and exciting and different and kind of wild. And, but what I pivot it to is, what are we doing? What are we doing to evolve ourselves? And if people want to emulate, then that means we're doing something right. And I think it's the key that I'm talking to whenever I get into the high level execs I work with, or like a Mike Katz at T-Mobile, or like a Yusuf Mehdi at Microsoft, or Kieran at Microsoft, whatever, these execs that are ballers and they're big thinkers, Nick, and they want to push forward and take chances. And then let everybody else do what they do. I think if I spent a tremendous amount of time worrying about what other people were thinking, I definitely wouldn't have come up with Wedding Crashers. Let's put it that way.
So, as you talk about taking chances, it brings me to risk, because I think it's something that creators, storytellers value. But I feel like in both worlds, you alluded to earlier, the realization that, the studio is hoping that this makes some money. And I think on the other side, you talk about the baller execs, the marketers that you're working with. They too want it to work. Risk is scary. How do you balance? Yes, risk is worth betting on, or when is it too risky?
It's a great question. It's a je ne sais quoi I'm going to talk about, which is a little bit wow. Okay, Nick. Okay. But there's an elegance of a fine line between being risky and I call it like a threading the needle is what I would say is what we do to risk meets commercial. And what I mean by that is, let's take, is there a risk in using Billy Bob Thornton, who's never done a spot, and how blessed we are that he did it because of our relationships and the safety he feels? I would say there's zero risk. There's only upside. What is risky in a spot like that we just did? It's quiet. It's more, it has a elegance and a patience. Well, that takes a lot of courage for, the guys at T-Mobile, Mike Katz, Sherini now, Sievert, these guys to greenlight a commercial that takes its time. Now, we have our own tricks, right, to engage quickly, but it still has it's less wham, bam, and so that's a risk. I would call that a risk, but is it when you have Billy Bob Thornton who locks you in? So how do you do what we always create? Is there's a safety mechanism in all our risky work, so to speak, Nick, I guess, where I always, even in my movies, Vince and Owen in Wedding Crashers, it suits, there's an elegance to it. There's Christopher Walken, there's giant, brilliant stars. in a hard rated R comedy about crashing weddings. That mashup, there's a safety in the word weddings and a risk in the word crashers. You put those two words together, risk, no risk, elegant risk is what I would say. How about that? Weddings, elegant, risk, crashers. So if you think about the mashup of the work that we've done in branding, I would say I'm combining those almost two words together that there's a risk possibility in it, but there's a safety in it as well. That allows people to kind of get excited about creative because you're walking that line that we all do as humans, right? We live in gray. We all have, because we're dual. We have dual personalities. You're like, because you're always battling the devil and the angel on your shoulder in life, right? But we all kind of, but so there's, anytime you're playing with creativity, and maybe Nick, I'm getting a little like spiritually weird in terms of creative, but there's a fine line between putting all that together to give the spot what I call zhuzh. And then that gives people like, it has an attitude, I guess, to it. More importantly, how about this? If there's truth in the spots, you're not just being funny for the sake of it, but there's something else behind it, a humanity that we all connect to, then it always lands. So I don't know if that answers the question, Nick,
It does. I love that. And that contrast everywhere from the T-Mobile spot to Wedding Crashers makes it easy to see as something consistent in your work. Well, our conversation has made me smile, and it is my opportunity, Andrew, to get to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently.
Nike.
Okay.
Nike did a spot that was for, I think it was World Series stuff with an organ, and it was, ba-da-ba-bum-ba-ba, and it was playing hard that track, and and it was like, okay, kind of like, seen it again. You want to talk about zhuzh, right? Sometimes when Nike does a mashup, they knock you out, and then they pull around, they come around, and it's Ken Griffey Jr., takes his hat, puts it on backwards, and he has this maniacal laugh, almost like, gotcha. And there was something spiritually in what we were telling you earlier, Nick, that they landed that they had a little bit of attitude mixed in with what you thought was kind of a straight ahead thing, that they then flipped it on its head. And I think that's where I love to live, which is that kind of attitude.
I love that. And again, reinforces this idea that's been the through line of our conversation.
Yeah. And last thing I'll say, Nick, I think the most important thing that I could add to all of this is, how does your brand you're working work with measure success when you go into creating? And is it that you make something great? Or is it that the thing that you made that is great is going to move the needle for the business where they need it to be? Not even necessarily for awards. I mean, I think awards are great and everything, but in Hollywood, we use awards to sell. Academy Award winner, Golden Globe winner. I love that people like to get awards in the branding space. And I think for that world, that could be very important. For the brand itself, if you can't win an award on the creative side that helps you sell your brand or helps you sell the phone, again, I think it's just important to always ask yourself that question: why?
What are we celebrating? Are we celebrating because we accomplished our objectives, or?
You asked me the question earlier on the podcast about, and I just keep asking the same question. Ask your team constantly, why are we doing this? So,
Andrew, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Well, I think we have an Instagram. I mean, we've been very undercover, Nick, for a very long time. I think it's just not, I don't know. We didn't really want to talk much about it. This is the first time I've ever been on anything like this. I think there's Instagram. I think it's a Panay Films Insta, and you can see a lot of the stuff on there and reach out to us. And I think, and then LinkedIn, you can really get to us on LinkedIn. And I think, like I said, we've been very kind of quiet. I think it's because we just love what we do. So we just keep our heads down and doing our thing. I think I probably could do more Nick podcasts and things too. But of course, again, what's our objective? Our objective is to make sure.
Just going to say the same thing.
Well,
don't just be on a podcast.
That's been the battle. That's been the battle. Like even in myself personally, was that I only care about my brands. I just want them to win really badly. They risk their careers by hiring this group of filmmakers to build their brand. And my only goal is for them to win, for my team to be happy doing it. And but look, we'd love to grow. We'd love to help create thought about brands and about, are you going far enough? And are you too comfortable? It's just,
right.
And by the way, I'm too scared to be comfortable, Nick. I wake up every morning going, my life is over. I mean, as a filmmaker, you think it's doomsday on a daily basis. I wish I didn't feel that way, but it keeps the drive going, right? I think that way about the brand. I'm like, no, that's not enough. That's not good enough. We can never chase. We can never chase. We have to be leading. So anyway, Nick, I appreciate you today.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to everything we talked about at onbrandpodcast.com. Andrew Panay, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate you.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.